The property and urban development industry has long been considered immune to innovation, but in the last 5 years, I think we've seen rapid adoption across nearly every asset class. Some of the innovations are set to change the way that the industry operates, and others may be less convincing. To help us unpack the opportunities and risks that face us all in the industry, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, we have Christopher Omeissah, to my right. Christopher is one of Australia's most trusted advisors for companies at the intersection of technology, real estate and construction. He specialises in the commercialisation and growth of emerging businesses and that use of technology as a leverage to positively disrupt the built environment. Christopher aims to rethink service delivery and sector leadership in order to improve market information, embed digital knowledge, foster innovative behaviours for real estate and construction leaders. Driven by a clear sense of purpose and passion for the PropTech sector, Christopher has worked both locally and internationally for newly emerging PropTech companies as well as existing real estate, construction and real estate companies. Next to the right, we've got Sheridan Ware. Sheridan is the Chief Information and Technology Officer for Charter Hall. As one of Australia's leading property and fund managers, where she oversees technology strategy, operations and change. She's passionate about empowering people to live their very best lives by creating frictionless workplace experiences, improving efficiencies and generating new insights. Sheridan has served as a commercial property industry for over 12 years and has previously worked for Cushman & Wakefield as the Chief Information Officer based out of Hong Kong. And finally, we've got Jason Chuck. Jason is the Chief Customer Officer for Domain, previously the Chief Executive Officer for Avenue, LJ Hooker's digitally enabled real estate agency. Jason has spent over 15 years growing and scaling international technology businesses with a focus on strategy, sales and marketing. Prior to working at Avenue, Jason was the Asia Pacific Managing Director for House, founding their Sydney office and APAC businesses. As Domain's Chief Customer Officer, Jason is responsible for all of the 9 majority-owned real estate platforms, products and functions. Would you please join me in welcoming the panel to the stage? So I think to help everyone just get a bit of context, maybe I'll start with you, Chris, but could maybe tell us a little bit about your organisation and what you do in PropTech?
Sure, so KPMG, obviously we're quite a new player when it comes to PropTech itself. I've only been with the firm for 14 months. The work I do in PropTech is essentially, when you hear KPMG, you probably think audit, tax, accounting, all the fun stuff to do with property. But within our organisation, we have a fast-growing PropTech property practice, and we also work with our clients to help them bring to market, underwrite and develop emerging real estate products and services. On one hand, I've had a lot of live experience with PropTech startups, and I guess there's now over 250 in Australia alone, 7,000 globally. So we're seeing an increased trajectory of different PropTech companies come through. So our top clients are now asking the question, do we look at PropTech companies and align ourselves with PropTech companies, or do we take a systems landscape approach and invest in our own IT capabilities? So I lead that advisory stream for the firm, and that's my background.
Fantastic. And Sheridan, if you could answer as well.
For Charter Hall, yes. I think one of the most exciting things we've done is that we're first to market with our own, Australia's first PropTech accelerator. And we have a number of startups that went through that acceleration program, hard at work in our business, solving for some of our challenges out at tenant and our building community challenges. We've just gone live recently with our smartest building to date, GPO Exchange in Adelaide, so we're really excited to be on the smart building journey. And then the last thing that I would point out, I think, is we've spent the last 18 months building out a data and analytics capability, and a lot of that 18 months has been putting the plumbing in place, but we're starting to see the fruits of that labour now at Charter Hall.
Fantastic. And Jason, you've had a pretty amazing, I guess, career and worked for a whole range of different companies, but in terms of your role at Domain as Chief Customer Officer, tell us a little bit about the organisation and what you do in PropTech.
Yeah, well, Domain, we say our mission is to inspire confidence across all of life's property decisions. I'm sure most of you would know Domain first from domain.com.au, which is property leading website for searching, buying, selling, renting your home. But we're also an ecosystem of multi-platform property solutions. And so within my role at Domain, as Chief Customer Officer, I look after everything across the consumer journey, starting from marketing, our publishing and editorial, but also our new PropTech consumer businesses. And I guess typically within the industry, a lot of our competitors or others would send the consumer off of their site when, from like a lead gen perspective, where in mortgages, insurance, other areas that are close adjacencies where they can take a clip of the ticket. Whereas we've been really trying to invest in that technology to really improve the customer experience and just digitize those processes where we feel we can be adding to that value of our consumers throughout their property journey. So a couple of quick examples of that is we have a PropTech business in the mortgages side called Domain Loan Finder, and we've really tried to invest in just digitizing and simplifying that process of getting not just finding a home loan, but the application and trying to even connect all the way to the bank's decision engine, so that I think in the near future we'll be able to online quickly be able to give people a pre-approval, where that fundamentally then changes your search experience, where we can allow people to understand what they can afford while they're searching online. We can put a little tick next to properties. It will be quite interesting, but I think also for you in the room or for our business partners, we'll be able to also just give you a lot more information about that inquiry coming through. What is the borrowing power of that person that's searching? We've also invested in building actually it's going live today, is domain insurance. So that's something we've revamped, where again we've really tried to focus on digitizing that process end to end. Like to get home and contents insurance, typically it would be 30 plus questions. It would take you about half an hour, whereas we've gotten that down to less than 5 minutes, and it's about a dozen questions. By taking that expertise of data and what we know about the real estate industry, replacement costs, we're able to just use that data, improve that experience, so that we can partner with our users. And ultimately, I think what's really exciting is then we have a relationship with them outside of only that buy and sell experience. So when we see property prices changing, we can proactively talk to them and tell them you're overinsured, underinsured, and just be that partner with them throughout their home ownership lifecycle.
Fantastic. And I think, I guess, the size of your user base or database and the amount of insights you could mine from that audience, and also, I guess, under the banner of Nine Media as well, to build out the products and slowly vertically integrate that experience down the chain. Is that the ambition for Domain?
Oh yeah, it's that investment in data. We have a team of a dozen plus data scientists. A lot of that tech jargon, but really investing in both machine learning, artificial intelligence, that AI. We're constantly trying to learn how do we build that best customer experience, but ultimately, how do we also develop marketing solutions that we can also pass on to the rest of the industry? So like at Domain, we have over 6 million users across Australia that we touch every month. Now with our partnership with Nine, that number's grown to over 11 million. And we have essentially, we have billions of first-party data points that we're able to really analyze everything from migration patterns. We have like a vision artificial intelligence where we'll look at the photos, try to break apart because we might not understand what's actually in it from tagging. But if a customer has come to the site and we see that they're really interacting with pictures of swimming pools, for instance, why should the order of the photos of how you actually market a property not be tailored to the interests of this person? It's very similar to what Netflix does. If they know that you like action movies, they're going to show you Keanu Reeves for Speed. If you're into romantic comedies, they're going to show you a Sandra Bullock cover photo. And so we've been using these sorts of technologies just to better learn how do we better market your properties, our properties, to customers. But also we also are constantly trying to learn how they interact with our listings as well. So that's where we need the machines to help us pick out a lot of those data points as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I guess Sheridan, Jason on the digital side of registering intent and solving those problems for their users, you're very much dealing with that same problem, but in the physical space of commercial buildings.
Exactly. So we are very, very focused on two things. So experience and the operations of the building themselves. So, and I think that's about to get really exciting in the commercial real estate space, particularly in the office space. So we've been working really hard to connect the occupants and our building communities, the wider communities that utilise the facilities within our buildings, to the services and the others in the community, to create a sort of collective sense of whole. But what I think is going to get really interesting moving forward is to not just be thinking about the base building itself, but also extending that more into the tenancy and how we're engaging people, not just in the communal areas, but in the tenancy themselves, and so that we can start to drive better outcomes around employee engagement and experience and well-being. And then with the government now starting to drive us more towards open data standards, which will give customers the better rights over their data, but also the obligation for us to share their data with others that they choose. There's all sorts of use cases that I think we're going to have to connect and collaborate on at the smart city and the smart precinct level. So I think that's going to get really interesting, and I think on the data's really driving a whole different way of us operating our buildings. Obviously, the more things that we connect through sensors and the like, the more we can get an understanding in real time about how the building is operating, either impacting negatively on the occupant experience or overutilising utilities like energy and reduction of waste and the like. So that's also getting really interesting, and there's an opportunity, I think, and we already are connecting and collaborating as a landlord community or an owner community, because obviously every time we connect something up, we're increasing the threat landscape of what can be attacked. So that cyber security element is becoming just increasingly important, and we're connecting and collaborating around how we can have an industry response to protecting our buildings from the threat of attack.
Very interesting. And, Chris, you're in a very unique position where you kind of transcend pretty much every sector, every product, every insight in PropTech. I guess, what are the major trends that you're seeing in the industry at the moment?
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting space, especially with the panel we've got today. I form a view where I think the real estate data's been, historically, it's been awful, right? So I don't think we effectively capture and know how to ingest the data, how to properly use the data. And as a result, the real opportunity and theme I'm seeing becoming more prevalent is around data management and data visualization, right? We've been approached by funds and clients who typically own assets. They don't understand who's in their buildings. Even if they wanted to communicate with the people in their buildings, they wouldn't know what questions to ask them. So I guess the key theme that I'm seeing is companies need to do more small scale and large scale to actually digitize the data, and I think there's some very clever real estate people in the room, and everyone in here knows that this is an industry that typically doesn't move very quickly. So I try to be less evangelical about PropTech itself and more pragmatic about it being a step-by-step process. So I think the key theme that I'm seeing, I know property as a service and urbanisation is something that the likes of WeWork will slow that process down again. But I think actually getting control and a handle on your data management is something that we're developing internally, which I'll speak to hopefully a bit later, but that's certainly a key theme that I see.
Well, I think, especially with the larger incumbents, they have the economies of scale, the application. Sheridan, you're probably in that bucket, to find the ROI on investment in technology. But for those that aren't at that level, for maybe the smaller and mid-tier developers and even architects, where are we seeing the greatest efficiency of application of technology within buildings?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, I guess. From where I'm standing, I see, no matter what size you are, all players need to actually get more educated around the technology. So part of my day-to-day role, I'll sit there and understand the strategy and options available to real estate funds, property clients, everything from dirt to disposition, essentially. So there's key themes that permeate the architectural, engineering, construction industry, and also the real estate hospitality industry and the blurring of the lines there. So that's more concerned with how do we actually maximise the return on the underlying asset. From an architecture perspective, again, I'll go back to data as the first stop. And if you don't have good data to work with, if there's a lack of availability of strong data, the key is actually getting key insights which can help drive your business or whatever outcomes you're seeking. So from a smaller play perspective, I think there's opportunities, and we get approached with this all the time, understanding whether we need to invest in a fund, align with a fund. We've had fund managers that typically, and that's another sticking point for me in terms of key themes, the communication between LPs and GPs. I mean, we can meet people online through the likes of Tinder and dating apps, and we communicate now through social media and what have you, but we still have a process where investors and fund managers, it's still notoriously slow moving.
Yep.
So to answer your question, I think establishing a proof of concept or working with either an emerging PropTech company that suits your needs, which we help scan and understand, and helping them augment your core business, I think is a great starting point for a lot of smaller developers that are sort of saying, well, this is a bit over my head. We don't build these types of assets. But just understanding that where strategic business improvement can lie in your business or in your building, which serves the customer. So that's I guess how I'd answer that question.
Fantastic advice. I think, and Sheridan, I think in relation to, I guess the same question, initiatives and thinkings for those mid-tier, small-tier businesses, where do you see there being the greatest efficiency?
Yeah, I don't think we have an issue with the amount of data that we've got access to, and I don't think we have an issue with the technology options. But the trick, I think, is not to start with the technology or the data, but to really, as Chris was alluding to, start with the challenge that you're trying to solve for, and make sure that challenge is actually worthwhile and commercially viable to solve for. So where we see a really great jumping off point, where you can get to return on investment quicker, is really in the energy efficiency space, and that's a win-win, because you can drive down costs, but you can also push towards the sustainability targets that probably a lot of us in this room have. So I think that's a really great starting off point, and I think start small, prototype, experiment, learn as you go, find out what works for you, and then move on to the next thing. So that would be my advice.
For sure. Jason, probably a little bit more on the consumer side, but very much still in how data is collected, analysed and used within the industry, and from your view, any advice for the audience on application?
Yeah, I think we always talk about, from a data point of view, if you want to improve a process or improve things, obviously you need to measure it before you can improve upon it. But there's just so much data out there right now. We keep talking about that analysis by paralysis, there's so much. I think often as a small or medium-sized business, having that capability and those teams to kind of go through that reams of data, I think, for us as Domain, because we see so much from a consumer side, I think it's, we see it as our responsibility to partner with you all to really help you understand what we're seeing from our consumers and how that can kind of short-circuit some of the trends that are happening. A lot of times, kind of some of the things we see, like in Sydney, for instance, in the eastern suburbs, in a place like Bondi next to the beach, it's surprising that the #1 home feature that's being searched for is actually a swimming pool, right? And people are asking us about, well, should I be planning for electrical cars in my developments? Yeah, I mean, we're seeing whether or not they're searching for them within car parks in certain areas. Although some stuff it's on the horizon, so we aren't searching for people for 5G capability at this stage, but those are all things that we are able to look at the trends and the patterns and be able to share that back as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
The PropTech theme is I guess a broad term. There's a lot of products and a lot of technologies that sit under that banner. But maybe to help us as an industry understand where you think, whether or not it's IoT or 5G or electronic vehicles or anything in between, what do you think is overrated or underrated at the moment?
I think when it comes to the technologies itself, and it's a good question. I guess I don't think any certain technology is overrated or underrated. I think certain technologies lack product market fit, and they're not driven by the right business model, and as a result, they don't do well, right? So I've seen, and I guess an example, one of the companies that was nominated for an award last night, Omeissah, which is a supply chain tracking material for construction. So essentially, is a coin cell battery that allows you to track high value materials and connect the job site to essentially allow all facets of a day-to-day program to be interconnected. I mean, we're seeing great applications of IoT in construction, great applications of AR and VR in terms of helping to analyse data, which and dwell times in the sales and marketing process. We're seeing, so I do think, I mean, they're just a couple of examples, but I think we're seeing technologies that are actually solving a problem. I think Sheridan and I talked about how there's a lot of hammers looking for nails in this space. So it's really about, and it's not always looking at a PropTech. I mean, and this is where I was going prior. You take a founder with $50,000 or $100,000 and one school of thought and a problem they're charging for, and you align it with a large corporate who's usually has problems which are complex. So I guess that's one side of it, and the other side is taking that systems thinking approach. How can I actually improve my process? Where do I want to be in 5 years? And so to go back to your question around the technology itself, I don't see any as underrated or overrated. I'm seeing good applications of technology in certain fields. But yeah, I guess and a good example just on that is valuations, right? If you look at AVMs, the application of artificial intelligence is something our own surveys say won't hit us for a while. But in the residential space, in Jason's world, it's a very commonplace to assess the valuation of your properties instantly, and that's what home buyers want. Things like Open Door, where they're coming and making instant offers for your property, rely on these types of algorithms. So, but in the commercial property space, I think you'll see that it's still a while away in terms of AI impacting the valuation of commercial assets. The predictability of revenues in commercial assets is something that's an issue at the moment, with the likes of flexible operators coming in. So again, it just turns on the actual product market fit for the technology itself.
But the product you were speaking about at the very beginning, Omeissah,
Yep.
Is that, do you think then you'll see kind of the architects on the front end of the project being able to detail more complex potential parametric architecture designs, which then can be delivered on the construction side because that technology is joining construction and architecture?
Absolutely. I mean, going back a step, it really starts with, I mean, each architect is creative in their own right, and I guess they have their own view on the application of what technology is useful and what's not. So I certainly think that's within the realm of possibility. Whether I'm seeing a genuine take-up of that at this point is another question. But I guess it starts with the entrepreneur, the developer themselves, the architect themselves, actually working to collaborate. So they need to actually foster that approach.
And Sheridan, is there anything that's kind of?
I don't think we can underestimate IoT. I think that there's so much potential there. I think it'll be like our new internet. I think that we have only just started to scratch the surface of what's possible by connecting sensors to equipment and to be connecting with digital experiences through people's mobile phones. I think we're only touching the surface, and I think we'll only be limited by our own imagination when it comes to IoT use cases. But a word of caution, I think, with IoT is, I think there's a bit of a propensity to let's just put a sensor on everything, and then we'll work it out later. And I just don't know that that's the right way to approach IoT. I think again, it's starting with what are we trying to solve for, so that you don't end up. We talk a lot in my team about sensor creep and data swamps. You can find yourself drowning in data really, really quickly, and then it's really hard to get out of those situations. So IoT definitely.
Just on that very quickly, what are the applications that you guys are using IoT in your buildings at the moment? Where are you getting real benefit?
Energy efficiency and waste are two focus areas for us. And of course, through Charlie, we're trying to connect building services with our building communities with others in the community and the services of the building through the mobile app. The one new application that we're having there, which we're really excited about with GPO Exchange in Adelaide, is actually replacing the security pass through the phone. So we haven't quite solved, unfortunately, for lockers and printers, but we're getting there. But it's really just taking out the friction from people's lives by using a mobile phone as an IoT device, frankly. So I think that's where we're focusing on right now. But again, we're just touching the surface, I think, of what's possible. In terms of maybe, not that it's we're overrated, but I think we should just temper expectations about 5G. I'm not a telecom expert, but I think when we hear about 20 times download speeds and performance, we kind of think that that's going to really change our experience as consumers. But I think that actually the value of 5G will be far more in the use cases that it enables, particularly around autonomous vehicles. I don't think we need 20 times, we're not going to really feel that performance uplift as much as it sounds like on paper as consumers. And I think it'll be a really slow burn. I mean, the 5G networks will be incredibly dense, and it's going to take a long time for Telstra and the other providers to stand up those networks. So I think maybe that, let's just temper our expectations. And then the one that I'm getting increasingly excited about is blockchain. So we haven't really found a use case that works right now for blockchain in property. We've got the AXX, for example, looking to replace the chess system with blockchain, so they're really working through that use case at the moment. But as data becomes more open, I think that blockchain will allow us to provide more seamless experiences at the smart city level, and I think blockchain will start to connect the entire property life cycle and eke out incredible efficiencies if we can all really sort of decide on data standards and how we're going to utilize the blockchain together to really go after those efficiency gains. So I think there's three that are worthwhile watching or tempering expectations on.
Awesome. And Jason, is there anything that you're seeing that's what you think is either going to be transformational for our industry or maybe less so?
I think just following on Sheridan's examples, I think 5G is quite interesting, although it's going to take some time. I think it is important as well, and because once that starts rolling out, consumers are going to need, they're going to want that access. And I think it's also important to remember that 5G is a very different technology, where as you're developing buildings, it actually doesn't necessarily penetrate the skin of, it doesn't actually go through objects the same way that 4G and 3G does, right? So thinking through that development over the next few years, I think is an important thing to keep in mind. But when it comes to marketing your projects, for instance, on 5G, I think an HD movie will take 2 to 3 seconds to download, right? When we've been talking about virtual reality for so long, it's on the cusp where it's still very uncomfortable for a lot of consumers to be in that space. Whereas you could also envision 5G just bringing a different way of having that HD marketing experience in terms of how you're able to then download that full virtual tour, but on say large screens, different sorts of formats. I think that'll be quite interesting. I think a lot of the innovations aren't necessarily hugely disruptive or hugely innovative, but I think we live in a world right now where people have very short attention spans and they want everything digitized. So just we live in a world of Uber Eats and Uber and Airbnb. So a lot of these platforms, from strata management, property management, people just want to be connected and have instant ways to digitize their processes and connect to the landlord, connect to the building manager. I think those are important things to continue to consider. We were talking about iBuying a little bit in terms of the AI valuation models for homes and for properties. You're definitely seeing a lot of that. Chris, you mentioned Open Door. There's a lot more of those globally. I think here in Australia you have companies like Brickfloor, a little bit different, but I think it's such an interesting model because it really solves a major friction point in the home purchase journey, where if you're able to get an automated offer for your home, which might not be the best price, but at least you can start that process of getting a better bridge financing rate, or if you know you're automatically get a certain price, you can already have that mortgage and you can start purchasing that next property before worrying about selling for the best price on the other side. So I think that's a really interesting one to continue to watch as well. And I mean, the Internet of Things, I think that's just going to continue to, the sensors are going to be needed. I know a lot of us are already investing in those level of sensors for like the common spaces and big commercial areas, but people want them in their individual homes now. So when no one's around, we're turning off the aircon or turning on the heating at the right timing as well. And so that again kind of goes back to that backbone infrastructure for buildings, needing that fiber, needing that 5G capability as well in the future. So
awesome. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. I know we'll probably have a few questions from the crowd. So if anyone wants to ask any of our panelists questions, please raise your hand. We'll have a microphone to you soon.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's good to see this up on screen. Mark Kentwell from PRD Newcastle New Projects. I'm actually involved in a venture capital fund called Pilot, and I'm on the advisory board of that. And now it's jumped up in recent times as, you know, real estate specific and the only one that's got just real estate investment, but we're starting to see this now with Westpac Bank getting behind some big moves, and then we're starting to see some of the majors coming through as well, some firms that have been very traditional in the past. You know, having looked at sort of 400 plus companies and only investing in 5 or 6 over the period of sort of since 2016 when we started, there's a lot to work through and there's a lot of immature businesses there. I'd be interested in each of your views as to whether you think that large firms like each of yours in slightly different sectors are taking the path of looking for others that are already doing well and adding fuel to the fire by either bringing them in-house or bundling them together, or you're actually out there trying to reinvent the wheel and create your own, because that's been a big blockage in, say, fintech, with everyone out there trying to create their own, and they sort of figured it out about 10, 15 years later. They're better off just going and getting 2 or 3 of the best ones and putting them together. So interested in your views on those.
Happy to take that as a start, but I certainly agree in terms of the PropTech landscape itself as it stands. There's a lot of companies there where, and I think as an investor, you would have to ask yourself whether the technology is deep enough that it can't be replicated quite quickly. You alluded to looking at other sectors and how that technology can actually be brought through, and I think the best example in property is DocuSign, looking at how a legal platform, which Second Century Ventures, who we hosted at our offices last week, actually invested in early on, and they tailored that legal product for the real estate industry. So you can see that I think we're under no illusions, property is slow moving, and a great example is if I have an Amazon account, I make an Amazon purchase once a week over 5 years. How many times do I buy and sell property over 5 years, right? So it's typically been an industry where people put their savings into it, are very conservative around and risk averse when it comes to investing around their asset. But moving into what KPMG thinks of that space, we recently invested in a legal tech, which I was involved in Plexus, and that was led with the Aconex founders, Rob Philpott and Lee Jasper as well. So we are a company that if we do see something, we like it, want to take a piece of it, we will. Do we have a set strategy around partnering or acquiring and aligning with certain PropTechs? No, and I think the reason was that we sat, as a real estate leadership, we sat down and really said that the most sensible players in the space are actually sitting back and understanding, okay, which players will last over the next 3 to 5 years, and where should we essentially place our bets. So I think from an investment side, looking at other industries for proof points is definitely the way to go with real estate technology. Absolutely.
I would say there's an absolutely incredible opportunity for us to collaborate and work almost in ecosystems around shared areas or mutual interest, or areas of mutual interest. So in my previous role, we were working with one of the global VC firms as a corporate partner. So we weren't investing from a VC perspective, but we were investing in the VC fund with our time, energy, and some funding. And what we got out of it was actually an opportunity to connect with the startup world and understand trends and and what was going on, but there was something far more intrinsic, and it was the opportunity to work with other corporate partners and to bandy up on, like, we're trying to solve that too. What about we take a Microsoft and a real estate firm and partner with these startups and actually let's put our heads together and solve for those opportunities. And it's the perfect way to bring subject matter expertise with technical expertise, and not be reinventing the wheel, as you said, constantly. I think it's a huge opportunity for all of us to think about.
Yeah, I would say at Domain, it's a bit of a hybrid approach where technology or not, historically we've always looked for partners that would be additive to the customer experience, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel of something that we're not experts at. And so our Domain Loan Finder business, for instance, that's a joint venture of ours with Lendy, right? We work closely with them. They're the experts on the digitization of mortgages component, but we have all the insights from the real estate data side, and we thought, hey, this is one where we take the best of both worlds, bring them together. And I think it's important for us that we're investing in technologies that we do think is additive to the customer experience versus just shooting them off the site and just trying to find the shortest pass to a clip of a ticket sort of thing.
Awesome. I think we've got a couple more. Raise your hand high if you've got any questions. Yep. One over here.
Hi everyone, really interesting insights. Thank you. My name's Michael Bailey from Open Architecture Studio. I know that none of you are in builders per se, but there's a whole world out there where they're starting to fabricate entire boats and entire buildings from 3D printing, and I'm interested in your thoughts on if you have any about how the actual construction of the buildings that we're all involved in might change and how quickly that's coming, and whether it, is it on our doorstep now, or is that sort of 10 years away still?
Good question. Chris, maybe?
Yeah, I think when it comes to modularisation, 3D printing and building, it's also always important to first look at the challenge most companies are trying to solve, and I think a lot of the time it's a painkiller or a vitamin, as it was put to me last week. Do we want to increase costs or reduce costs or increase revenues out of these products? I actually currently work with a lot of modular companies, one being Fast Brick Robotics, who's definitely innovating in that space, based out of Perth. So they're a bricklaying robot to help build buildings in our own crazy utopia where robots build buildings and other robots help manage them. So it's interesting to see. I personally, my view on 3D printing and prefab and modularisation, we're seeing more and more, especially in the community housing space, so areas that government are more interested in actually finding cost-effective solutions. Those technologies, I personally believe, are on a 5 to 10 year bell curve, like most things within real estate. I think where we'll see the changes in 2030, 2040, and not necessarily tomorrow with everything, especially in that space that's traditionally antiquated. It's a tribal industry based on tribal knowledge, basically. So the appetite for change is there within construction. I think that's one thing about the Australian market which we should be proud of, and I'm very excited by the ability to actually work with innovators and true leading innovators in that space. But I definitely think there's still a while to go before we see rapid take-up of that.
I guess also Katera in America, which is completely vertically integrated, the kind of modularisation and fabrication of homes with technology the whole way through their business. In Australia, I mean, that's still yet to be proven that it's actually worked yet, but in Australia, how many new models or methodologies are you seeing in modular fabrication?
Yeah, and again, with that example, it's the difference between process and outcome, right? So conceptually, all of these ideas make great sense. I think things like Katera, where they're just throwing a lot more money at those solutions, will eventually teeth well, but there are still hiccups, which we were talking about how one barrier in the road can really stall the whole process, and I think that's what you'll see with a lot of construction technologies at this point. So you typically have to look for the path of least resistance with these types of technologies. In terms of the amount that I'm seeing, At the moment in Australia, we work closely with Brick and Mortar Ventures, so the number one construction tech VC based out of the US. And when Darren was here a couple of months back, we had a conversation. They recently invested in that one Omeissah product, which we saw last night at the awards, which is great for Australian construction technology. So a handful in modularisation, I should say. A lot of them are lacking the proofs of concept. We saw Live and Modular as well last night, which is great. But again, I think that this is where there's a nice intersection between the developers that are actually making the difference and doing the hard work, and the innovators that can actually work with them to collaborate on those concepts.
And just on that, I think very quickly, because Charter Hall's in a very unique position as a larger incumbent to dictate standards for new technologies, what are you guys doing in that space?
Obviously not a lot in the build, because we're not builders. We bring in builders to do that work for us. But what I'm seeing is this amazing opportunity for us to integrate the entire property life cycle. So starting with design into build, into operate and refurb, how are we working together on data standards and on technologies that help us manage across that life cycle? So we're driving a conversation amongst the owners and builders at the moment around digital twin technology and what our data standards will be, who's responsible for what, because we're all going to have to play by the same rules to really eke out efficiencies, but to leverage the power of those technologies together. So I think that's bringing us much closer together, and this theme of collaboration will just get stronger and stronger.
Fantastic. Well, we're out of time, guys, but I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and please join me in thanking our panel for their discussion today.